In a wooden temple outside Kyoto, the floor creaks with every shift of weight. Incense smoke curls up past a single hanging scroll, and in the center of the room, a 74-year-old monk sits cross-legged on a worn cushion. No notebook, no laptop, no flashcards anywhere in sight. He closes his eyes, and then he starts reciting a 62-page sutra from memory. Word by word, pause by pause, his voice barely above a whisper, but every syllable lands in the right place. He hasn't reviewed this text in 11 years. 11 years. Now cut to you. You watched a 40-minute lecture yesterday, and right now, honestly, you couldn't name 3 key points from it. You've read, what, 3 books this year? Maybe more. Could you summarize any of them if someone asked at dinner? You've taken notes you'll never open again. Highlighted paragraphs that might as well be invisible. Saved bookmarks on your browser that are basically a graveyard of good intentions. And the instinct is to blame yourself. My memory sucks. I'm just not good at retaining information. Maybe I need a better app. Nah, your memory is fine. The problem is you've been taught to learn like a computer. Input, store, retrieve. Neat, linear, and completely wrong. Because your brain wasn't built to work like a hard drive. It was built to learn like a craftsman. Through touch, through repetition that evolves, through depth that most modern education never asks for. And this is not another active recall and spaced repetition video. I know you've seen those. I've made those. You already know the theory. Close the book, test yourself, space it out. Got it. But knowing the theory and actually remembering what you studied 3 weeks later are 2 very different things. And you know that because you're here. What I'm going to show you are 3 principles that the Japanese built into their culture centuries before any neuroscience lab existed. 3 ways of learning that attack different parts of why your brain keeps leaking information. Each one has a Japanese name. Each one has hard science behind it. And none of them require you to download anything, buy anything, or wake up at 5 a.m. The monk in Kyoto doesn't have a better brain than you. He has a better system. And that system wasn't invented in a Silicon Valley productivity startup. It was built in dojos, temples, and workshops over hundreds of years by people who needed knowledge to survive, not just pass an exam. And once you see how it works, the way you've been studying is going to feel like trying to fill a bathtub with the drain open. Here's something that's going to sting a little, but you need to hear it before anything else in this video makes sense. You're not bad at learning. You were trained inside a system that was designed for the industrial age, a system where the whole point was memorize facts, pass the test, move on. Nobody cared if you remembered it in June. They cared if you could regurgitate it in March. That system was never built for retention. It was built for compliance. And you've been running on that broken operating system your entire academic life. Think about what studying looks like for most people. You read the chapter. Maybe you underline a few sentences, the ones that feel important, whatever that means. You reread it. Then you show up to the exam and pray that something stuck. Researchers call this the passive encoding trap. And here's why it's a trap. Your brain forms strong, durable memories when multiple regions fire at the same time. Motor cortex, sensory cortex, hippocampus, cerebellum. When several of these areas light up together during the same experience, the memory gets anchored from multiple angles, like staking a tent with 4 pegs instead of 1. But passive reading? That activates almost exclusively the visual cortex. 1 peg, 1 anchor. Wind blows. Tent's gone. And then you're staring at the exam wondering why nothing looks familiar even though you studied for 5 hours. Now here's where it gets interesting. In Japan, learning was never separated from doing. A calligrapher doesn't study the character and then write it later. The writing is the studying. A martial artist doesn't memorize the sequence of movements and then go practice. The practice is the memory. This isn't some poetic cultural observation. It's neuroscience happening inside a dojo. Madan and Singhal published a review in 2012 on something called the enactment effect. When you pair information with physical movement, gesture, or action, your brain encodes it significantly stronger than when you just read or hear it. We're not talking a small bump. Studies in this area consistently show dramatic improvements in recall, sometimes double, depending on the task. Not a marginal edge. A completely different league. The Japanese didn't read that study. They didn't need to. They'd been living it for centuries. And I'll be honest, I didn't understand any of this until about 2 years ago. I was the guy who read 30 books a year and couldn't tell you what was in most of them. My Kindle was full. My brain was empty. I thought the problem was volume, that I just needed to consume more. Turns out the problem was the exact opposite. I was skimming everything and absorbing nothing. Every page I read was one peg in a windstorm. So the Japanese didn't stumble onto a better way to remember things by accident. They engineered it into 3 principles. 3 ways of learning that have been hiding in plain sight for centuries. Each one targets a different flaw in how your brain handles new information. They have names: Karada de Oboeru, Kata, Shokunin Kishitsu. And together, they're the closest thing to a cheat code for your memory that actually has science behind it. Let's start with the one that rewired how I study completely. And it begins with your hands. In Japanese, there's a phrase, "Ti de we eru," Karada de Oboeru. It translates to, remember with the body. It's what a sushi chef says after 10,000 hours of slicing fish. His hands know the exact angle, the exact pressure, the exact speed of the blade. He doesn't think about it anymore. Ask him to explain, and he'll struggle. But hand him the knife, and it's automatic. His body remembers what his mind let go of years ago. This isn't mysticism. It's a well-documented area of cognitive science called embodied cognition. Lawrence Barcelow, a researcher at the University of Glasgow who's spent decades on this, developed what he calls grounded cognition theory. And the core idea is this: when your body is physically involved in the learning process, your brain creates what scientists call multimodal memory traces. That means the memory isn't sitting in one spot. It's distributed across motor regions, sensory areas, even the parts of your brain that process spatial awareness. More anchors, more redundancy, way harder to forget. Now think about what this means for you. A calligraphy apprentice in Kyoto doesn't sit at a desk reading about stroke order on a screen. She kneels on a tatami mat, brush in hand, grinding the ink herself. She can feel the weight of the brush between her fingers, hear the bristles drag across the paper. Every character she writes is a full-body event. Her shoulder moves, her wrist adjusts, her breathing slows to match the rhythm of the stroke. 6 months later, she can write those characters without thinking. Not because she reviewed them more, because her muscles, her senses, and her spatial awareness all encoded the same information at once. 4 memory anchors where most people only build 1. Now compare that to how you studied last week. You probably read something on a screen, maybe highlighted a sentence, maybe scrolled back and reread a paragraph. 1 anchor. Visual cortex only. Everything else in your brain was on the bench. Muller and Oppenheimer confirmed a piece of this in 2014. Their study, "The Pen is Mightier Than the Keyboard," published in Psychological Science, showed that students who take handwritten notes retain significantly more conceptual information than students who type. Not because writing is magical, because writing by hand forces your brain to compress and reformulate. You can't transcribe word for word with a pen, so your brain has to actually process the material to decide what to write down. Typing lets you go on autopilot. Your fingers move, but your brain checks out. So here's something you can do tonight. I call it the body encoding protocol. And yeah, the name sounds clinical, but the process is dead simple. Spend 15 minutes with your material. Then shut everything down. Laptop, phone, textbook, all of it. Now grab a blank piece of paper and a pen. Not your keyboard. A pen. And reconstruct what you just learned. In your own words, by hand. While you write, narrate it. Out loud. Like you're explaining it to someone sitting across from you. And if you can, get on your feet. Pace around. Let your body move while your brain works. 3 sensory channels firing at the same time. Your hands shaping the ideas, your voice reinforcing them. Your body anchoring the whole thing in physical space. You're doing what that sushi master has been doing for decades, letting your body carry what your mind alone would drop. If this is landing for you, if something just clicked, hit like on this video. Not for the algorithm. For you. It's a bookmark, a reminder that you found something worth coming back to. All right, so your body's in the game now. But here's where almost everyone makes a mistake that kills their progress. And it has to do with how you repeat things. In a karate dojo in Okinawa, a student runs the same sequence of 23 movements every single morning. Same kata, same order. Been doing it for over a year. But, and this is the part that an outsider completely misses, it's never actually the same. Monday, the sensei watches and says, "This time only think about your feet. Where they land, how they grip the floor." Tuesday, forget the feet. Feel your breathing. When does the exhale come? Wednesday, close your eyes. Do the whole thing by feel. Same 23 movements. Completely different experience every time. And after a year of this, that student doesn't just know the kata. The kata is inside him. He could do it half asleep, mid-conversation, in a parking lot. It's not memory anymore. It's reflex. This is where Western repetition goes sideways. We treat repetition like a photocopy machine. Run the same thing through the same way. Hope it gets clearer. Read the chapter again. Rewrite the same notes. Do the same practice problems. And it works. For about 72 hours. Then it fades. Because your brain doesn't strengthen memories by walking the same neural path over and over. It strengthens them by being forced to find the path from different starting points. Rohrer and Taylor published research in 2007 that showed varied practice. Same material, different angles, produces significantly better retention than blocked practice, where you just grind the same thing identically. Think about it like a jazz musician. Coltrane didn't practice "My Favorite Things" by playing it the same way 500 times. He'd play it in a different key, change the tempo, strip it down to just the melody, build it back up with a different rhythm section. Same song, 1,000 versions. That's why he could improvise on it for 20 minutes straight without thinking. The neuroscience behind this is about how memories graduate from temporary to permanent. New information starts in your hippocampus, conscious, fragile, easy to lose. But when you repeatedly access that information through different contexts and different cognitive routes, your brain gradually transfers it to the basal ganglia and cerebellum, the regions that handle automatic, long-term procedural knowledge. The stuff you don't have to think about, like riding a bike, or, for that karate student, throwing a perfect front kick while someone's yelling at him. So here's the practical version. I call it the Kata study method. Pick a topic you need to master. First pass, study it normally. Read it, watch it, whatever. Second pass, explain it to someone, a friend, your dog, an empty chair. Third pass, draw it, visual map. No words allowed. Force your brain to represent the information spatially. Fourth pass, connect it to something from a completely different subject. How does this biology concept relate to something you know about economics? About music? About cooking? Same material. 4 different lenses. Each lens forces your brain to reconstruct the memory from a new angle. And every reconstruction makes the neural pathway deeper, wider, harder to erase. Body memory, structured variation. Two pieces of the system. But there's a third, and honestly, this is the one that separates people who pass a test from people who remember things for the rest of their lives. In Japan, there's a concept, Jiren-chi-ju, Shokunin Kishitsu. It roughly translates to the craftsman's spirit, and it describes someone who has poured their life into mastering one thing so deeply that it becomes part of who they are. Not a hobby, not a skill on a resume, an identity. There's a sushi restaurant in Tokyo, Sukiyabashi Jiro. The apprentices there spend their first 3 years just learning to cook rice. 3 years. Rice. Not because the chef is cruel or old-fashioned, because he understands something that most learners in 2026 completely miss. Depth is the foundation that makes everything else possible. And this, right here, is where you've been getting it wrong. You don't have a memory problem. You have a depth problem. Think about the last 6 months. How many books did you start? How many YouTube videos did you watch about productivity or habits or how to learn faster? How many podcast episodes? Now, how many of those did you actually implement deeply enough that you could teach the core idea to a stranger without hesitating? Yeah, that's the gap. You're skimming 12 books instead of mastering one, watching 40 videos on focus instead of sitting down and building one deep practice. And your brain, which is doing exactly what it's designed to do, looks at all that shallow input and goes, none of this seems important enough to keep. Because nothing went deep enough to build what cognitive scientists call a schema. Schema theory goes back to Piaget, but John Sweller refined it into something practical with cognitive load theory. Your brain organizes knowledge into mental structures, schemas, that work like scaffolding. When you deeply master a foundational concept, you build a strong schema. New information that relates to it doesn't need to be memorized from scratch. It clicks into the existing structure almost automatically. That's why experts look like they have superhuman memory in their field. They don't remember more individual facts. They have deeper scaffolding where new facts organize themselves. Think about chess. A grandmaster doesn't memorize 32 individual positions. She sees 5 or 6 familiar patterns, schemas built from thousands of hours on fundamentals. A beginner sees chaos. She sees architecture. Same board. Completely different experience. So here's the depth-first protocol. Pick whatever you're learning right now. Find the single most fundamental concept in it. Not the most interesting one, the most foundational. Study it until you can explain it to a 10-year-old without hesitating, without filler words, without glancing at your notes. Then connect that concept to 3 things you already know from completely different areas of your life. Only after that, only when that foundation is solid, do you move to the next concept. I know what you're thinking. That sounds slow. It is. At first. But here's what happens after 2 or 3 weeks of this. Every new concept you encounter sticks faster. Because it has somewhere to land. It's the difference between throwing darts at a wall and throwing darts at a dartboard that's already hanging there, waiting. The monk in Kyoto didn't memorize 62 pages of text. He internalized a structure so deeply that the words became part of his breathing rhythm. The sushi apprentice didn't memorize rice temperatures. He built a schema so rich that his hands adjust without conscious thought. You don't need a better app. You don't need a new note-taking system. You need to stop treating learning like a buffet and start treating it like a craft. So what does this look like when you actually sit down tonight and use it? You clicked on this video looking for a better way to remember things, but what you actually found, I hope, is something bigger than a trick. It's a different relationship with learning itself, one where you stop treating your brain like a filing cabinet and start treating it like what it actually is. A living system that learns through movement, through variation, through depth. So let me make this concrete. No vague advice. No, go implement this sometime. Here's exactly what to do before you go to sleep tonight. Pick one thing you're currently trying to learn. Doesn't matter what. A college course, a programming language, a new skill at work. Whatever's been sitting in your brain refusing to stick. Grab a blank piece of paper. Not your laptop. Paper. And write down everything you know about that topic from memory. By hand. Out loud. Stand up if you can. Let it be messy. Crossed out words, arrows, half-finished thoughts. That's your body encoding. That's Karada de Oboeru happening in real time. Tomorrow, come back to the same material, but study it through a completely different lens. Draw it without words. Teach it to someone. Connect it to a random topic you already understand. Same content, new path. That's your first kata. And this week, instead of jumping to the next chapter, the next module, the next video, stay with that one concept. Go deeper than feels necessary. Explain it until there's no hesitation left. Build the schema first. Let the scaffolding get strong before you start hanging new things on it. That's it. That's the system. Body memory. Varied repetition. Depth before breadth. 3 principles that have been running underneath Japanese culture for longer than any study technique app has existed. Your brain is going to resist this. It's going to tell you this is too slow, too simple, that you should just watch one more video instead. Recognize that voice. That's the skimming habit talking. The same habit that filled your bookmarks and emptied your memory. Tonight, you do something different. Just once, and see what happens. The Japanese didn't build a memory technique. They built a way of learning that turns knowledge into instinct. And now, so can you. Tell me in the comments, which one of the 3 hit you the hardest? Karada de Oboeru, Kata, or Shokunin Kishitsu? I read every single comment. Subscribe if you want more systems that actually change how you think, not just how you feel for 10 minutes after watching a video.